Hey guys, if you're a traveler or you plan on traveling soon, this is a must-have. I'm going to show you how to make your own travel wallet. It'll have room for debit cards, an ID, a boarding pass, a vaccination card or passport, some cash, and some coins. Let's get to it. So when printing your pattern, you're going to make sure that your scale is set to 100% and that you don't have two-sided or double-sided checked off, and then click print. Cut out your pattern pieces along the solid outer lines. For the zipper pouch piece, cut out the inner rectangle. Here's my fabric. I'm going to be using this glittery, shiny one for my outer fabric, the non-glittery one for my inner fabric. If you wanted to, you could use the same fabric for both the inside and outside. This is mid-weight interfacing that's fusible on one side, and this is some 12 gauge clear vinyl. I'm going to be using snaps for my closure, but you can also use velcro. And with that, I'm going to be using this tool to attach them. You'll also need pins or clips and scissors or a rotary cutter. And also an iron. Lastly, you'll need a zipper, and it needs to be minimum 3 inches long. Mine is 4 inches long, so it's just a tad tiny bit too long, but that's okay because you can always make it smaller. You just can't make it bigger. So the vinyl sleeve piece is for the clear vinyl. You'll need interfacing for these 3 pieces, and also cut off and set aside just a small piece of 1 inch by 1 inch scrap interfacing. We'll be using that later on. You'll cut these pieces out of your lining fabric, but again, you can choose to use the same fabric for both the in and outside if you'd like. And these pieces will be cut out of your outer fabric. Some pieces require both outer and inner, or inner and interfacing. All of that will be indicated on the individual pattern pieces. If a pattern piece doesn't say outer fabric or inner fabric, it's because you can choose either one. Side note, for the zipper pouch, do not cut out the inner rectangle from the fabric just yet. Just cut around the outer edges. For the pieces that say cut on fold, you'll want to make sure that the fabric is folded on itself once so that you're cutting on 2 layers. Place the pattern against the fold and cut. Iron all of the wrinkles out of your fabric. While we're here, we're going to fuse all of our interfacing. So since I have mid-weight interfacing, I'm going to stack 2 of them on top of each other, and then my inner fabric piece on top of them. Sided interfacing typically has a side that's rougher and shinier, and then a side that's more dull and soft. The rougher and shinier side is the adhesive side. So that side is going to be faced up against the wrong side of my lining fabric. If you have heavy weight interfacing, you'd use just 1 layer. Let's work on the zipper pouch. So you're going to take the fabric that you cut for this piece, turn it over so that the wrong side is facing up, place the pattern over top, and trace the inside of that inner rectangle. Then you're going to turn it back over and place 1 zipper pouch lining piece, right sides together with the outer piece. Pin it in place and then sew along the lines of that rectangle that you just traced. Backstitch in the beginning and end of your stitching. Then you're going to draw the same lines from that inner rectangle that you cut out of the pattern piece, inside the rectangle that you just sewed. The points of those arrows come in about 3/8 of an inch from the sides. Cut out those lines through both layers of fabric, making sure not to clip your stitches in the inner corners of the rectangle. Pull the lining through the outer fabric and press it down with the iron to get it to lay flat. Place your zipper right side up inside the window and pin in place. I like to make sure that that metal tab at the end of the zipper is inside the window just so that I don't accidentally sew over it when I go to stitch along the edges of the window. Again, if your zipper is a little too long, no problem. Just pull the zipper until it's just inside the window. And when you sew around the edges of the window, it'll create a new starting point for the zipper. Top stitch all the way around about 1/8 of an inch away from the window. Clip off the excess zipper. Take your other lining piece and place it right sides together with the one sewn to your outer piece. Pin only the 2 lining pieces together. Sew the two lining pieces completely closed, making sure to move the outer piece out of the way while you're sewing. Sew with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Cut off the excess seam allowance. Fold in the corners of all 3 layers towards the back of the pouch, and then fold in the edges. You're going to be folding the edges in about 1/4 inch. Clip them in place and set the pouch aside. Now we're going to work on the clear vinyl sleeve for the vaccination card. So you're going to take the vinyl binding and place it right side down. Lay the vinyl on top 1/4 inch in from the edge and top stitch an 1/8 inch away from the edge of the vinyl. You can pin the 2 layers where they overlap because this part will not be visible from the outside, so you won't see any holes. Fold the binding over to the edge of the vinyl and then fold it over once more to cover that stitching you just did. Clip in place and sew with a scant 1/8 seam allowance very close to where the binding and the vinyl meet. It should look like this. Next up is the card slots. On the pattern piece there's a dashed line about 1/4 inch down from the top. This line indicates where you're going to fold the fabric. So use the edges of that dashed line to mark on the fabric where you need to fold. Fold the fabric, press it in place, and then stitch with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Repeat this for all 4 pieces. Grab the card slot backing that you should have fused your interfacing to. Take a ruler and measure 1/2 inch up from the very bottom and draw a line. You're going to do this twice more, so you'll end up with a total of 3 lines, all 1/2 inch away from each other. Take one of your card slot pieces and place it right along the top line that you drew. Clip or pin it in place and sew along the bottom with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Repeat the same for the other 3 card slots, working your way down. Next, you're going to sew up the sides to keep everything in place. Sew with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Place your binding right side down against the right edge of your card slot. You should have about 1/2 inch of the binding hanging off the top and bottom. Fold down the excess binding to make it level with the backing, and clip it in place. Flip it over and sew just beyond the stitch that you just made along the edge. This will ensure that that stitch is not visible on the front side. Fold the binding to the edge of the backing once and then fold it over again. Clip it in place, turn it around, and stitch with a scant 1/8 seam allowance right next to the binding seam. Next, grab your card slot backing pattern piece and use the dashed lines to mark where you're going to fold the top of the backing. Fold it over, press in place, and stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Iron the whole piece to smooth it out and set it aside. Grab your 2 sleeve pieces. One is going to be for your passport and the other one is going to be for cash or folded up papers. On the pattern piece, there is a dashed line that indicates where you will fold for the passport sleeve and where you will fold for the cash sleeve. Mark one sleeve with the passport dashed line and the other with the cash dashed line. Fold and press each one. Sew the passport sleeve with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and the cash sleeve with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Grab your passport sleeve and you'll know which one because it'll have a wider seam allowance on the back and you can trim off a bit of it if you'd like. Lay it down right side up and then lay your clear vinyl sleeve on top, also right side up, about an 1/8 inch underneath the stitching you just made on the passport sleeve. Clip it in place. At this point you can grab your vaccination card and just place it on top right underneath that binding. You should have about 1/2 inch of fabric left at the bottom. If you do, your vaccination card should fit. If not, you may have placed the vinyl sleeve a little too far down and you'll need to adjust it. Clip off the excess vinyl at the bottom and set it aside. Line up the right edge of your card slots, right against the hemmed edge of the right side of your cash sleeve. Clip together and sew a scant 1/8 of an inch away from the outside edge. It should look like this. Next, sew right on top of the stitching that's on the left side of the card slots. Just like with the vaccination card, take a debit card or an ID and slip it in to make sure that it fits. If you have an old boarding pass lying around somewhere, you can also slip that in behind the card slots to make sure it fits. Take your closure pieces that should have the interfacing fused on and put them right sides together. Clip together and sew with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, leaving the bottom open. Cut off the excess seam allowance and make slits around the curve, but be careful not to clip into your stitches. Turn it right side out and push out the curve. Press out the seams and top stitch all the way around with the exception of the bottom. Now let's attach the snaps. You're going to be attaching the stud portion of the snaps to this closure. I'm not sure if it's called a stud, but it's the part that pokes out. How you attach it will depend on the kind of snaps that you have and the attachment tool that you have. If you were using the velcro, you would just put one side of the velcro onto the closure. Take both your outer and your inner piece, fold them in half both ways, and mark the center. Use those markings to center the wrong side of the inner piece against the wrong side of the outer piece. Fold the right and left side edges of the outer piece to the inner piece, and then fold over once more. Clip it in place. Fold in half long ways and mark the center of the left side with a pin. Take a ruler and mark 1 inch in from the edge where you place that pin. This mark is where you will attach the other part of your snaps or velcro. Remove the inner fabric. Grab that extra 1 by 1 inch piece of interfacing I told you to cut before. Place that interfacing adhesive side down on the same spot where you made the mark for the snaps or velcro, except put it on the wrong side of the outer fabric, and hit it with an iron. Grab the other pieces of your snaps or velcro and attach it right over that spot you made on the front side of the fabric. The mouth portion or receiving end of the snaps should be faced up on the right side of the fabric. Place your inner piece back on top of your outer piece, wrong sides together, using the marks you made previously to center them. Double fold the right and left sides again. Press in place with an iron to create a crease. Remove the inner piece once more. Flip it over and place a ruler straight across the fabric. Use that snap or velcro you placed as a guide to make sure the ruler goes straight across the center. At that center, measure 3/4 of an inch in from the folded edge, and place your closure at that 3/4 inch mark, with the stud side facing downwards and the raw edge facing left. Unfold the edges of the outside fabric just to make sure you don't accidentally sew over them. Pin in place and sew across with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once yours looks like this, place your zipper pouch on top and pull it over the closure just enough to cover that stitching you just made. Try your best to center the pouch and pin in place. Make sure the outer fabric edges are unfolded and sew around the pouch with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. And now your zipper pouch is attached. One last step before we assemble the whole wallet. Take your loop piece and fold it in half, wrong sides together long ways, and press it in place. Take one side, fold it towards the center, press it in place, and do the same with the other side. Fold the whole thing in half, press it in place, and stitch the open edge with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Fold your loop in half so that the raw edges are together, press in place, and we're ready to assemble the wallet. Center your inner fabric right side up against the wrong side of your outer fabric. Grab your card slots and line up the left edge with the left edge of the inner fabric. Fold the corner of the outer fabric towards the corner of the inner fabric, using an iron to keep those corners folded. And then double fold the sides of the outer fabric using those creases that you made before. Your outer fabric should fold over onto your inner fabric, hiding all of that stitching that's along the edge of the inner fabric. Clip it in place. Grab your vinyl and passport sleeve and line it up with the right edge of the inner fabric. Repeat the same folding methods that you did on the left side of the wallet. Place your loop right in the middle between the cash and passport sleeves. Line the raw edges of the loop up with the edge of the inner fabric. Fold and clip the remaining sides of outside fabric. Once you have everything clipped or pinned, sew along the edge of the fold with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch in the begin and end of your stitching, and also when you go over the loop. And finally, you have yourself a travel wallet. Just give it a good press and it's good to go. You can even make simple wristbands that attach to the loop and you can wear on your wrist to keep that wallet securely in your hands. I made both a straight, relaxed wristband and more of a scrunchy type wristband. This wallet measures 4.5 inches in width and 6 inches in height. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you give this project a try. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and take care. Bye-bye.